the eyes of a predatory animal, and it made my heart freeze. He'd never done anything to harm me or anyone else as far as I knew. But the look in his eyes alone was enough to let me know that I was facing a serious threat. I started running even faster, trying to create distance between us. I could still hear his heavy breathing getting more and more strained. I ran like my life depended on it, adrenaline pumping through my body and giving me renewed strength. I tore off my necklace and threw it on the ground, thinking I must leave a trace if he takes me. Something must be left behind. I tried screaming, hoping someone would be close enough to hear me, but I wasn't able to scream my lungs out and keep up the pace at the same time. Why is he doing this? What does he want? Who is this guy? I thought, as I started to feel my lungs burn. Then, I thought of my 15-month-old daughter and ran until I could taste blood in my mouth. It was still behind me, maybe 100 meters. But now I figured that if I trip and fall, or run out of energy, or even fumble with the car keys, once I reach the parking lot, I'm screwed. So once I reached the sharp turn on the trail, I went off the trail and ran straight into the dark woods. I only ran a short distance, then laid myself down flat on my stomach, hands searching for a rock to defend myself with if he found me. I realized that I was wearing bright running clothes with reflexes and neon coloring. I've never felt so visible in the dark before now. I could hear him reach the turn, and thank God he kept on running. I started to slowly and as silently as possible move further and further into the darkness. My heart sank again as soon as I heard rapid footsteps closing in from the trail. He'd realized that I must have gone off the trail once he saw that there was no sign of me ahead of him. He stopped, and I stopped. I could imagine him listening for any sound. I held my breath and begged to a God I don't believe in to make him go away. After a while, I hear him say something in a language that I didn't recognize, and then walk off. I didn't move. I feared that he would wait for me by my car and realized that I'd gone off the trail and onto the main road and to try and stop someone. I could not go back to the parking lot. I started to make my way further into the woods, knowing that I would eventually end up on the last part of the long tail and close to the main road. The lights on the trail suddenly shut off. It made me calmer at first. The dark was comfort and sort of a protection. But then, after only a few moments, it switched on again. This could mean another person had started their run, and I soon would have someone there to help me. Or he was now looking for me and getting ready to prey on another lonely runner. I decided against waiting it out and continued my way towards the main road. It was dark and I fell multiple times, my clothes getting wet from the damp vegetation, and I began to get cold. After what felt like a lifetime, I could see the 10-kilometer trail ahead, and I knew I was now close to the main road, and soon I could hear traffic. Once I made it to the road, I must have looked like I'd been in a terrible accident. Blood from several cuts from the falling. My clothes were dirty, and my face, I presume, was petrified. My bright running shorts soon attracted the attention of a passing car. My waving and desperate shouting made it stop. The driver, a 40-ish man with 2 kids in the back seat, spent the next 10 minutes or so trying to make sense of what I tried to say in between the sobbing and crying. He asked if I wanted to lift back to the parking lot. I told him no. Please just take me home instead. At home, my husband insisted on going back to the parking lot to retrieve the car and call the police. To report what? I asked. No crime had been committed, but I knew he was trying to get me. My husband ended up going back for the car. The driver's seat window was smashed and my phone was gone. So was the photo of my daughter that I had hanging from my mirror. I don't know what he was trying to do, or why he even chased me the way he did. That look in his eyes. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that he had bad intentions. So about 5 years ago, I, a 26-year-old male, set out to travel the world. Being straight out of college had left me in a debt, even more desperate for any job, that I was overqualified for and just generally depressed. I felt isolated and alone in my small town in Washington, and found the only way to get out was to travel. My high school friend suggested that I look into woofing and volunteering as a way for cheap travel, so I did just that. The way it works is quite simple. You work for around 25 hours a week on some farm for food and housing. The draw is that since the community of cheap-ass travelers is quite big, it's a great way to meet new people, get outside of your comfort zone, and just let yourself live and figure life out. Fast forward 8 months, I'm a seasoned cow shit shoveler. Start out in Washington, then go to Oregon, and went south to California. There, I was able to save some money that I was paid under the table for some extra work. I was now faced with a decision. Where do I go in the world? The excitement of being able to purchase a ticket to almost anywhere in the world got the best of me, and on the advice of my hippie volunteering partner, chose it at random. I went to a randomizer website, clicked on the country button. It landed on Georgia, the country of Georgia. To say I didn't know anything about it was an understatement, but the fear of the unknown made it exciting and exotic somehow, so I did it. I purchased a ticket and started browsing for a farm that would host me. There were few options, and most were remote, without even an internet connection. I messaged every single one, because few ever respond. I got a response from one farm on top of a mountain. The pictures showed a traditional Georgian stone house with a large garden out in the back, a family with several cheerful children, grandparents having dinner, animals. It seemed warm and inviting. The description was written in good English, and the requirements for work seemed very reasonable. I was excited. After I flew into Tbilisi, the capital, I followed the directions that they sent me to locate the farm, which wasn't an easy task. Very few in Georgia speak English. The roads are awful, since very few have been maintained since the fall of the Soviet Union. The country is very generally poor. It took me around 20 hours of Soviet buses and taxis, weird serpentine roads, and paths that get to the desired blue pin on that map. It was a dirt path leading up a steep hill into a national park up in the north of the country. There's nothing for miles on end but trees, and there's silence. As I got up the hill, I saw the house about a half a mile away on an even steeper hill, surrounded by trees. From that point, it seemed abandoned. It was overgrown, brown, and dreary. As I walked past the gate, Geary, the apparent owner, approached me. He was a heavy, small, middle-aged guy with a big smile on his face. He shook my hand and in broken English, started to show me around. He definitely reeked of booze. As he was showing me around, I noticed there wasn't anyone there but us. I asked about his wife and kids, and he brushed it aside and said something to the extent, "They're away right now." At this point, I'm kind of creeped out. From browsing around, it was apparent that the farm was in deep decline. Apple trees and crops were dying. The roof of the small barn had caved in. The house itself was full of trash and smelled of mold. It was obvious that Geary was going through a rough patch. But I wasn't going to turn around and just leave in the middle of nowhere, and not having slept for the past 36 hours. It was now evening, and after feeding me well and trying as best as he could to hold a conversation in English, Geary showed me my room on the second floor, and I went to sleep. I almost immediately blacked out from the exhaustion and stress, and I would have slept for 10 hours if I wasn't awoken by some strange noise in the middle of the night. It sounded like something metallic and heavy was being dragged across the wooden floor. In that sleepy in-between state, I listened for a few moments. Thought nothing of it and tried to go back to sleep once it stopped. In the morning, Geary was now sober and grumpy. He asked me to repair some of the windows and the doors in the house, as he himself planned to go and fetch some components in a nearby village. Again, I got this weird, creepy feeling down my spine. Something wasn't right. He didn't maintain eye contact, was very evasive. There's no cell reception and no internet. Once he left, I checked around the house to get a general idea of the place, and it became apparent that this place was hardly ever lived in. like one of those abandoned houses. There's broken furniture, newspapers, old photos on the floor, a shattered mirror. I took my phone and looked through the saved listing again. Photos I had didn't match the backyard, the garden, or walls. And Geary wasn't in any of them. This was a completely different house. Now by this point, I'm full-blown panicking. I packed up my stuff and started to leave when I saw a group of 3 men going up that first hill. There aren't any other paths I can take, so I go behind the house and rush down the hill into the forest. After some time, I stop and listen. I hear them in the house. They're clearly looking for me, afraid of making any noise. I remain completely still, hidden behind a bush. I don't know how long I waited, but they were obviously persistent. At some point, I hear them leave, so I count until some large number, and then proceed back into the house and path. Once I find it's all clear, I book the hell out of there. Never ran that fast before, but I'm still in the middle of nowhere. No traffic, no public transport. I reach a paved road and just start walking in the general direction from where I remember coming from. Hours go by. Finally, a car drives by and stops. Now in a horror movie, this would have been Geary and his friends. But this was actually a really nice Russian family that gave me a ride into town. The listing disappeared from the website in a few days after I left, and I haven't heard from Geary since. I've yet to make sense of that experience. I've traveled more since, and volunteered too. Some people, once they hear this story, laugh and say that guy was coming over with a couple of friends from the village just to have a chat over a few beers. Some say he was bound to kidnap and kill me. But I myself trust my gut feeling. Something was definitely not right. So to Geary, let's never ever meet again.
Drop a follow, share, and like Fasbytes Horror. Don't forget to enable notifications.
This took place over a year ago, and I'm still shaken up about this whole event. And I thought I'd share my story with you. I live in the UK, and in the fall, it gets dark around 4 p.m. There was a school autumn break that week, so all the kids were at home. So that means my girlfriend's brother was home too. I'd been with her for about a year at that point, so her family knew me pretty well, and her brother enjoyed my company. She'd recently been pretty stressed out. Her parents were going across the country for a day, so she had me look after her brother. But I thought that I'd give her a day to herself so she can just cool off. So I asked her parents if I could look after their son for the day, and they agreed. So I came over around 8 a.m. They let me in before they set off. My girlfriend's brother woke up about an hour later, and she followed shortly afterward. We went out for breakfast at a local cafe together, and went back to the house when we were done. Once I dropped her off, I took her brother to the park. We get there about 2 p.m., and the place was pretty packed. Eventually the sun started going down, and the place was completely empty by 4. I texted my girlfriend and told her we'd be home in a bit. She said okay. I'm gonna be honest, I completely lost track of time. Me and her brother were having fun being the only two at the park. So her brother and I stood on this really tall climbing fence with a slide on it. It was almost pitch black at this point, so I was using my phone as a flashlight. A notification popped up on my screen. It was my girlfriend asking where we were. I responded to her saying, "Oops, coming home now," and told her brother that we needed to go. He sighed and asked if we could go down the slides, and I responded yes. Before I went down, I knew what the park looked like. There were streetlights all around it, benches everywhere and some trees, and places for the kids to play. When I came out the slide, there was something weird. A man had appeared out of nowhere and stood beneath one of the streetlights. He had a trench coat on and a beanie hat. I immediately got my girlfriend's brother behind me and called out to the man with a friendly, "Hey there." I got a response. He started groaning. Yeah, I don't know. I noticed he was swaying back and forth in the light. He had his mouth open, was drooling, and had this blank look in his eyes. Man made me feel really, really uneasy. I picked her little brother up and kept checking on this guy the entire time. There was an exit to my left that led to the path back home, so we left out that way. I kept checking behind me every few seconds, and that man was still standing there. The path where the man was stood had a big main path, if you walk out through some bushes, and so does the other one that I walked through. We're walking down the path for about 2 minutes, periodically checking behind me still. I thought we were in the clear. We weren't. I was on a straight stretch of path with lots of streetlights when I saw him again. He stood beneath one, looking up at it. He was playing with something in his hands. I looked closer and realized it was a knife. Just kept walking and walking, continuing to check behind me. My girlfriend's little brother was so scared he had his head tucked into my chest. I noticed that the man seemed to be moving to new streetlights whenever I turned around. Initially, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but I started counting them and realized 2 streetlights behind him had definitely now turned into 5. I could faintly hear that